greeting cards were still arranged in perfect rows when Lisa Ziegert disappeared on April 15, 1992, in the quiet town of Agawam, Massachusetts, population 28,144. The spring evening had arrived with the gentle warmth that promised summer, and at Brittany Card and Gift Shop, the 24-year-old teacher's aide was finishing another ordinary shift. At 9:47 p.m., a customer later remembered seeing Lisa behind the counter, her kind smile illuminating the softly lit store as she rang up a anniversary card purchase. What happened in the next 13 minutes would shatter Agawam's sense of safety and launch a mystery that would consume a generation. Lisa's boyfriend expected her home by 10:15 p.m., but she never arrived. The next morning, concerned co-workers discovered the card shop's front door unlocked, the lights still glowing, Lisa's purse and car keys exactly where she'd left them. The cash register remained untouched, shelves perfectly organized, soft music still playing on the radio. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. The search began immediately. Friends and family flooded the streets with flyers, volunteers combed nearby woods, and helicopters swept across the Connecticut River Valley. For 4 desperate days, hope flickered like a candle in the wind. Then came the discovery that would haunt this close-knit community for the next 25 years. Lisa's body was found in a wooded area, the victim of abduction and murder. The crime scene yielded DNA evidence, but in 1992, the technology couldn't identify her killer. Decades would pass, suspects would emerge and disappear, families would grieve while maintaining hope, and somewhere in plain sight, a man named Gary Shara would live quietly among them, carrying a secret that would eventually destroy him. But how long can evil hide in a small town where everyone knows everyone? Before we get into the story, drop a comment with your country and the time right now. Lisa Ziegert stepped into Agawam Middle School on April 15, 1992, carrying the same gentle energy that made her beloved by students and staff alike. At 24, she possessed that rare combination of youthful enthusiasm and mature responsibility that made her perfect for working with special needs children. Her morning began, like countless others, with third graders rushing to show her their drawings and homework assignments. "Miss Lisa, look what I made for you," called out Tommy, a boy with Down syndrome, who struggled with most subjects but excelled at art. He thrust a handmade thank you card toward her, construction paper decorated with crayon hearts and stick figures. Lisa knelt to his eye level, her face lighting up with genuine delight. "Tommy, this is absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much." She carefully placed the card in her bag, planning to add it to the collection she kept on her bedroom dresser, small tokens of the lives she touched every day. The school day passed in its familiar rhythm. Lisa worked one-on-one with students who needed extra attention, celebrating small victories and offering patient encouragement through difficult moments. Her co-workers often remarked on her natural gift for connecting with children others found challenging. During lunch, Lisa chatted with fellow teachers about weekend plans and shared stories about her students' progress. She mentioned stopping by the card shop after school, her part-time evening job that helped supplement her modest teacher's aide salary. It was honest work at a friendly local business, and Lisa appreciated the quiet hours arranging inventory and helping customers find the perfect card for special occasions. At 3:30 p.m., Lisa waved goodbye to her students and colleagues, gathering her purse and the stack of papers she planned to review at home. She called her mother from the school parking lot, confirming dinner plans for the weekend and chatting about ordinary family matters. Her voice was cheerful, completely normal, the voice of a young woman looking forward to a quiet evening at work. The drive to Brittany Card and Gift Shop took Lisa through downtown Agawam's familiar streets. She parked behind the small storefront and used her key to unlock the back entrance, flipping on lights and checking the cash register before officially opening for the evening shift. The shop was cozy and well-organized, filled with greeting cards for every occasion, small gifts, and seasonal decorations. Lisa's evening routine was methodical and calming. She straightened shelves, checked inventory, and helped the occasional customer who wandered in looking for birthday cards or small gifts. The store's atmosphere was peaceful, with soft music playing from a radio behind the counter and warm lighting that made the pastel cards and colorful ribbons seem to glow. Around 7:30 p.m., a middle-aged couple entered seeking an anniversary card. Lisa helped them select something appropriate, engaging in the kind of friendly small talk that made customers feel welcomed. She processed their purchase at 9:47 p.m., accepting their cash payment and carefully placing their receipt in the register drawer. "Thank you, and have a wonderful anniversary," Lisa told them with her characteristic warm smile. The couple left and Lisa began her closing routine, though the store wouldn't officially close until 10:00 p.m. The shop fell quiet except for the soft background music and occasional sound of cars passing on the street outside. Lisa moved efficiently through her tasks, unaware that these would be her final minutes of ordinary life. At some point before 10:00 p.m., someone entered the store, someone whose presence would transform a routine evening into tragedy. The anniversary card receipt, time-stamped at 9:47 p.m., would become the last documented moment of Lisa Ziegert's normal life. a small piece of paper that investigators would study countless times in the years ahead. When Lisa failed to arrive home by 10:30 p.m., her boyfriend Derek began to worry. She was punctual and reliable, always calling if she would be late. By 11 o'clock p.m., his concern had grown to alarm. Derek drove to Brittany Card and Gift Shop, expecting to find Lisa working late or having car trouble. What he discovered instead defied explanation. The shop's front door was unlocked, lights still glowing warmly inside. Lisa's purse sat behind the counter, her car keys exactly where she'd left them. Her car remained parked in its usual spot behind the building, untouched and locked. The cash register held the evening's receipts, ruling out robbery as a motive. Derek called out Lisa's name, searching the small store's few hiding places. The stockroom was empty, the bathroom vacant. Everything appeared normal except for Lisa's complete absence. It was as if she had simply vanished mid-tack, leaving behind all traces of her presence, except herself. The first police officers arrived within minutes of Derek's frantic 911 call. They conducted a thorough search of the premises and surrounding area, finding no signs of struggle or forced entry. Lisa's purse contained her wallet, identification, and personal items. Nothing missing, nothing disturbed. By dawn on April 16th, Brittany Card and Gift Shop had become a crime scene. Yellow tape surrounded the building as investigators photographed every corner, dusted for fingerprints, and collected potential evidence. Lisa's unopened purse, still containing the everyday details of her life, lip balm, house keys, the thank you card from Tommy, would become a haunting symbol of interrupted normalcy. The mystery of Lisa's disappearance had begun, launching an investigation that would consume the next 25 years. News of Lisa's disappearance spread through Agawam like wildfire. By noon on April 16th, friends, family members, and concerned community members had gathered at the police station, demanding answers and offering to help search. Lisa's mother, Diane Ziegert, arrived pale and shaking, clinging to hope while fearing the worst. Within hours, volunteer search parties had organized. Hundreds of people combed through neighborhoods, parks, and wooded areas surrounding the card shop. Lisa's photograph appeared on hastily printed flyers that were distributed throughout the Connecticut River Valley. Local news crews arrived, broadcasting her image and desperate pleas from family members. The search expanded rapidly. Police dogs followed scent trails that seemed to disappear near the shop's entrance. Helicopters swept across fields and forest areas, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. State police joined local officers, bringing additional resources and expertise to the investigation. Lisa's sister appeared on television, describing her as a dedicated teacher's aide who loved working with children and had no enemies. Friends painted a picture of a responsible, caring young woman who would never simply walk away from her life. The community rallied around the Ziegert family, providing food, support, and countless volunteer hours. As the search entered its third day, hope remained strong but tinged with growing dread. Lisa's disappearance had united Agawam in a way nothing had before, with strangers working side by side in a desperate effort to bring her home safely. Missing person flyers bearing Lisa's smiling photograph became ubiquitous throughout the area, a paper trail of community determination and love. The massive search effort represented the very best of small-town America, neighbors helping neighbors, united by shared concern for one of their own. On April 19th, 4 days after Lisa's disappearance, the search took a devastating turn. A group of volunteers exploring a wooded area approximately 2 miles from the card shop made the discovery everyone had feared but hoped to avoid. Lisa's body was found partially concealed among trees, the victim of abduction and murder. The crime scene immediately became a center of intense investigation. State police detectives, forensic specialists, and the medical examiner's office descended on the secluded location. Evidence markers dotted the area as investigators photographed, measured, and collected every possible clue. The news of Lisa's death rippled through Agawam with crushing finality. The community that had spent 4 days united in hope now found itself united in grief and shock. Lisa's family, who had maintained optimistic public faces during the search, were devastated by confirmation of their worst fears. Initial examination of the crime scene revealed signs of a violent struggle. Lisa had been abducted from the card shop and brought to this remote location, where she fought for her life before succumbing to her attacker. The medical examiner would later confirm evidence of sexual assault, adding another layer of horror to an already tragic case. Among the physical evidence collected was biological material that would prove crucial decades later. In 1992, DNA analysis was in its infancy, but investigators had the foresight to preserve samples that might become useful as technology advanced. Crime scene marker 77, placed near where Lisa's body was discovered, would become a stark reminder of the moment hope died and the long quest for justice began. The heartbreaking discovery transformed a missing person case into a homicide investigation, forever changing the lives of everyone who loved Lisa. The homicide investigation began immediately with detectives casting a wide net in search of suspects. Lisa's co-workers, friends, and acquaintances were questioned extensively. Her ex-boyfriends underwent polygraph examinations. Anyone who had been in the card shop during her final shift became a person of interest. Investigators developed a timeline of Lisa's last day, interviewing everyone from her fellow teachers to the anniversary card customers. They examined her personal relationships, looking for signs of trouble or conflict that might provide a motive. Derek, despite his obvious grief and shock, submitted to multiple interviews and polygraph tests to rule him out as a suspect. The investigation generated hundreds of tips from the public. Callers reported suspicious individuals they'd seen near the card shop, vehicles parked in unusual locations, and various theories about potential perpetrators. Each lead was meticulously followed, consuming thousands of investigative hours. Several suspects emerged early in the investigation. A drifter who had been seen in the area around the time of Lisa's disappearance became a focus of intense scrutiny, but his alibi checked out. A former employee of a nearby business with a history of minor criminal activity was questioned extensively, but polygraph results were inconclusive. The investigation files grew thicker each week, filled with interview transcripts, forensic reports, and evidence analyses that led nowhere concrete. Polygraph test results showed the limitations of 1990's investigative techniques. Multiple suspects produced inconclusive readings, leaving investigators without clear direction. Despite the extensive efforts and genuine dedication of law enforcement, no arrest was made in the months following Lisa's murder. The case that had begun with such promise and community support gradually settled into the frustrating reality of an investigation with plenty of evidence but no viable suspect. 2 weeks after Lisa's funeral, Agawam Middle School's gymnasium filled with hundreds of community members for a memorial service that would become an annual tradition. Diane Ziegert stood at the microphone, her voice steady despite her obvious grief, speaking about her daughter's love for teaching and her dedication to helping others. Lisa believed every child deserved patience, kindness, and the chance to succeed, Diane said, holding back tears. She would want us to remember her not just as a victim, but as someone who made a difference in the lives of children who needed her most. The memorial service featured testimony from Lisa's students, colleagues, and friends. Tommy, the boy with Down syndrome who had given Lisa his handmade card, was helped to the microphone by his mother. In his halting speech, he said simply, "Miss Lisa was nice to me. I miss her." Hundreds of candles were lit in Lisa's memory, their flames flickering in the darkened gymnasium as the community pledged never to forget her or stop seeking justice. The service concluded with a moment of silence, followed by the school principal's announcement that a scholarship fund had been established in Lisa's name to support future educators. As people filed out of the gymnasium, many carrying their memorial candles, there was a sense of unity and determination that transcended the tragedy. The community had transformed its grief into a commitment to honor Lisa's memory and support her family's quest for answers. The memorial candles, blown out by the spring breeze as mourners walked to their cars, symbolized both the fragility of life and the enduring power of community love and support. In the months following Lisa's murder, investigators preserved biological evidence with the hope that advancing forensic technology might eventually provide answers. DNA analysis was emerging as a powerful tool in criminal investigations, but the databases and matching capabilities of 1992 were extremely limited. The DNA samples collected from the crime scene were carefully cataloged and stored in temperature-controlled facilities, awaiting the day when science might catch up with the investigation's needs. Forensic specialists explained to Lisa's family that the evidence existed, but the technology to utilize it effectively did not yet exist. By late 1992, the initial DNA profile from the crime scene had been developed, but searches through the FBI's nascent DNA database yielded no matches. The profile was clear enough to potentially identify a suspect, but only if that suspect's DNA was already in the system, an unlikely scenario given the database's limited scope. The investigators remained optimistic about future possibilities. They understood that DNA technology was rapidly evolving and that databases were growing larger each year. The evidence vial containing Lisa's case DNA samples represented both current frustration and future hope. The scientific community was making remarkable advances in genetic analysis, but practical applications for criminal investigations remained years away. For Lisa's family and the investigators working her case, this represented a particularly cruel irony, having potentially case-solving evidence that couldn't yet be utilized. The DNA evidence vial, carefully labeled and stored in the state police laboratory's freezer units, would wait patiently for technology and databases to evolve to the point where justice might finally be possible. The mid-1990s brought a painful routine to Lisa's case. Detective work continued, but with decreasing intensity as new cases demanded attention and leads grew cold. The investigation files, now filling multiple boxes, contained hundreds of interviews, forensic reports, and tip sheets that had failed to produce an arrest. Diane Ziegert refused to let her daughter's case fade from public memory. She organized annual memorial services, spoke to local media on significant anniversaries, and maintained contact with investigators to ensure Lisa's case remained active. Her persistence kept the investigation from being completely forgotten, even as resources were diverted to newer cases. The detective assigned to Lisa's case changed several times during the 1990s due to retirements and department reorganizations. Each new investigator brought fresh eyes to the evidence, but also faced the daunting challenge of familiarizing themselves with years of accumulated material. Periodic reviews of the case file revealed the same frustrating pattern: plenty of evidence, multiple potential suspects who couldn't be ruled out completely, but no definitive proof pointing to a specific individual. The investigation had reached the dreaded status of a cold case, though it was never officially closed. Lisa's photograph remained posted on the Detective Bureau's wall alongside other unsolved cases, a constant reminder of unfinished business. The cold case file box grew thicker each year as investigators periodically revisited old leads or pursued new tips, but the fundamental problem remained unchanged. The weight of unsolved justice bore heavily on everyone involved, from Lisa's family to the investigators who had worked tirelessly to find her killer, only to watch the trail grow colder with each passing year. In the late 1000s, 990X brought significant advances in DNA analysis technology, prompting investigators to revisit Lisa's case with renewed hope. The biological evidence preserved from 1992 underwent more sophisticated testing, yielding a clearer and more detailed genetic profile of her killer. The enhanced DNA profile was submitted to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, which had grown substantially since Lisa's murder. The database now contained genetic profiles from convicted felons across multiple states, dramatically increasing the chances of finding a match. Investigators waited anxiously for results from the database search, hoping that 6 years of technological advancement and database expansion might finally provide the breakthrough they needed. The enhanced DNA profile was remarkably clear, containing enough genetic markers to definitively identify Lisa's killer if his DNA was in the system. When the CODIS search results arrived, they delivered familiar disappointment: no match found. Despite the improved technology and expanded database, Lisa's killer's genetic profile was not among the hundreds of thousands contained in the system. The forensic laboratory technician who delivered the negative results explained that the database was still growing rapidly, with new profiles being added daily. There was reason for optimism that future searches might yield different results, as more convicted felons were required to provide DNA samples. The CODIS database printout showing no match found became another artifact of frustration in Lisa's case file, representing both the promise and limitations of evolving forensic technology. The investigation had taken a significant step forward scientifically, but remained stalled in terms of identifying a suspect. The 10th anniversary of Lisa's murder in April 2002 brought renewed media attention and community support. Local television stations aired special reports about the unsolved case, featuring interviews with Lisa's family and appeals for new information from the public. Diane Ziegert appeared on the evening news holding a framed photograph of her daughter and speaking directly to viewers. "Someone out there knows who killed Lisa," she said, her voice firm despite the emotion in her eyes. 10 years is too long for a family to wait for justice. Please, if you have any information, contact the police. Lisa's sister joined her mother for the media appearances, sharing memories that kept Lisa's personality alive in the public consciousness. She described Lisa's dedication to her students, her gentle nature, and her dreams for the future that had been cut short. The anniversary coverage generated dozens of new tips, though most proved to be dead ends or rehashes of information already known to investigators. Still, the publicity served an important purpose in keeping Lisa's case active and demonstrating that neither her family nor the community had forgotten her. A memorial service was held at Agawam Middle School, attended by many of Lisa's former students who were now adults themselves. They spoke about how Miss Lisa had influenced their lives and how they continued to remember her kindness years later. The 10th anniversary news article became a poignant reminder that while the community had not forgotten Lisa, a decade of investigation had failed to deliver the justice her family deserved. Throughout the 2000s, Lisa's case generated periodic bursts of investigative activity as new tips arrived or advancing technology offered fresh possibilities. Each potential lead was pursued with thoroughness born of desperation, but the pattern of hope followed by disappointment continued. In 2003, A tip about a drifter who had worked construction jobs throughout western Massachusetts seemed promising. The man's work schedule placed him in the Agawam area during April 1992, and his criminal history included charges for assault and breaking and entering. Investigators spent months tracking his movements and interviewing former co-workers and acquaintances. The suspect agreed to provide a DNA sample, which was compared against the profile from Lisa's crime scene. After weeks of waiting, the laboratory results showed no match. Another promising lead had evaporated, adding to the mountain of eliminated suspects and ruled-out possibilities. Similar scenarios played out several more times during the decade. A convicted sex offender paroled shortly before Lisa's murder became a focus of investigation until his alibi was verified through employment records. A tip about unusual behavior by a local man led to months of surveillance and background investigation, only to reveal that his suspicious activities were related to an extramarital affair, not Lisa's murder. Each failed lead took an emotional toll on investigators and Lisa's family. The weight of repeated disappointments wore heavily on everyone involved, though no one was willing to give up completely. The growing stack of suspect interview transcripts, DNA exclusion reports, and ruled-out possibilities became a testament to the thoroughness of the investigation and the frustration of pursuing a killer who seemed to have left no actionable trail. In 2010, a new generation of investigators inherited Lisa's cold case files, bringing fresh perspectives and modern training to the decades-old mystery. Detective Sarah Chen, recently promoted to the cold case unit, made Lisa's case one of her first priorities, spending weeks familiarizing herself with the extensive documentation. Detective Chen approached the case with both respect for the work of previous investigators and determination to find new angles that might have been missed. She created detailed timelines, relationship maps, and evidence matrices, looking for patterns or connections that might not have been apparent in 1992. The preserved DNA evidence particularly interested Detective Chen, who understood that forensic genealogy was beginning to show promise in solving cold cases. She contacted the State Forensic Laboratory to discuss new testing possibilities and database options that hadn't existed when the case began. Chen also reached out to Lisa's family, establishing a personal connection and assuring them that their daughter's case remained a priority. She explained new investigative techniques and technologies that might offer hope, while being careful not to make promises she couldn't keep. The cold case unit had developed new protocols for evidence preservation and testing that took advantage of improving technology. Chen ordered additional DNA testing on evidence that had been stored for nearly 2 decades, hoping that more sensitive analysis might yield additional genetic information. The evidence re-examination report that Detective Chen compiled became the foundation for a renewed investigative effort, combining old-fashioned detective work with cutting-edge forensic science in a final attempt to solve Lisa's murder. By 2017, the field of forensic genealogy had evolved dramatically from its experimental beginnings. Detective Chen partnered with genetic genealogy specialists who could analyze DNA profiles in ways that had been impossible when Lisa's case began. The technique involved uploading crime scene DNA to genealogical databases and building family trees to identify potential suspects. The process was painstaking and required specialized expertise. Genetic genealogists worked backwards from the DNA profile, identifying distant relatives whose genetic information was available in public databases. From there, they constructed family trees spanning multiple generations, looking for individuals who might match the demographic and geographic profile of Lisa's killer. After months of analysis, the genealogical research began to focus on one particular family line. The investigation had identified several men in the appropriate age range who had lived in western Massachusetts in the 1990s. One name that emerged from the research was Gary Shara, a man with historical ties to the Agawam area. The family tree chart that genetic genealogists created showed potential connections between the crime scene DNA and Shara's lineage. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling enough to warrant further investigation. Detective Chen began researching Shara's background, looking for information about his whereabouts in April 1992. The breakthrough represented a fusion of modern science and traditional detective work, offering the first real hope in years that Lisa's killer might finally be identified. The family tree diagram became the most important piece of evidence generated since the original crime scene investigation, potentially bridging 25 years of investigative frustration. As Detective Chen delved deeper into Gary Shara's background, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Shara, now in his 50s, had lived a quiet, unremarkable life since the 1990s, working various jobs and maintaining a low profile that might have kept him off investigative radar for decades. Most shocking was the discovery of letters that Shara had written years earlier, apparently confessing to Lisa's murder. The letters had been found among old case documents, overlooked or dismissed by previous investigators who may have viewed them as the ravings of someone seeking attention rather than genuine admissions of guilt. The handwritten confession letters contained details about Lisa's murder that had never been released to the public, suggesting that Shara possessed inside knowledge of the crime. In the letters, he described feelings of guilt and remorse, admitting to abducting and killing Lisa in April 1992. Detective Chen carefully reviewed the letters alongside the genetic genealogy evidence, building a case that combined DNA science with Shara's own written words. The combination was compelling. Scientific evidence linking him to the crime scene, corroborated by his own admissions of guilt. Background investigation revealed that Shara had lived in western Massachusetts during the early 1990s, working various jobs that would have given him familiarity with the Agawam area. His employment history and residential addresses placed him in the right geographic location at the right time. The yellowed confession letters, written in Shara's handwriting and containing unpublicized crime details, became the smoking gun that connected 25 years of scientific investigation with the killer's own admission of guilt. With compelling evidence linking Gary Shara to Lisa's murder, Detective Chen coordinated with prosecutors and supervisory personnel to plan his arrest. The case had to be handled carefully to ensure that 25 years of investigative work wouldn't be compromised by procedural errors or premature disclosure. Surveillance of Shara began discreetly, with investigators documenting his daily routines and current living situation. He appeared to be living a quiet, ordinary life, showing no signs that he suspected his decades-old crime was about to catch up with him. Prosecutors reviewed the evidence package that Detective Chen had assembled. The DNA match established through genetic genealogy, the handwritten confession letters, and the circumstantial evidence placing Shara in the area during Lisa's murder. The case appeared strong enough to support multiple serious charges. Legal paperwork was prepared in secret, including arrest warrants and grand jury materials that would formally bring charges against Shara. The investigation had reached the stage where scientific evidence, written confessions, and traditional detective work had converged into a prosecutable case. Lisa's family was contacted and briefed about the impending arrest. After 25 years of waiting, they were told that investigators believed they had identified and could prove the guilt of Lisa's killer. The news brought a mixture of relief, vindication, and renewed grief as the case moved toward resolution. The arrest warrant, bearing Gary Shara's name, represented the culmination of a quarter-century of investigative effort, scientific advancement, and family perseverance. Justice, delayed for so long, was finally within reach. On September 12, 2017, investigators executed the arrest warrant at Gary Shara's residence. The man who had hidden in plain sight for 25 years was taken into custody without incident, seemingly resigned to the fate that DNA science and his own written confessions had made inevitable. Shara's arrest sent shockwaves through the community where he had been living quietly for years. Neighbors expressed disbelief that someone they had known as a mild-mannered, unremarkable man could be capable of the brutal murder that had haunted Agawam for so long. The arrest warrant was executed with precision, with investigators seizing additional evidence from Shara's residence and formally charging him with murder, kidnapping, and aggravated rape in connection with Lisa's death. The charges reflected the full scope of the violence that had been committed against her. Media coverage of the arrest was extensive, with news crews broadcasting live from outside Shara's residence and the courthouse where he was arraigned. The story of Lisa's murder, cold for so many years, suddenly became front-page news throughout western Massachusetts. Detective Chen briefly addressed reporters, explaining that advances in DNA analysis and genetic genealogy had made the arrest possible. She credited the persistence of Lisa's family and the preservation of evidence by earlier investigators for creating the conditions that allowed justice to finally move forward. The handcuffs placed on Gary Shara's wrists as he was led away symbolized the end of his 25 years of freedom and the beginning of legal proceedings that would determine his fate for Lisa's murder. The news of Gary Shara's arrest spread rapidly through Agawam and the broader community that had never forgotten Lisa's murder. Longtime residents who remembered the 1992 investigation expressed shock and vindication that the killer had finally been identified and arrested. Television news crews interviewed neighbors who had known Shara, capturing their disbelief that someone they had interacted with regularly could have been living among them while harboring such a terrible secret. Many described him as quiet, polite, and unremarkable, exactly the kind of person who could hide in plain sight. Lisa's family held a press conference, with Diane Ziegert speaking publicly about the arrest for the first time. Fighting back tears, she expressed gratitude to the investigators who had never given up on her daughter's case, and to the community that had supported the family throughout their long ordeal. "We knew this day would come," Diane said, her voice steady despite her obvious emotion. "Lisa deserved justice, and we never stopped believing that the truth would eventually be revealed." The arrest reopened old wounds for many community members who had participated in the original search efforts and memorial services. Some expressed anger that Sarah had been free for so long, while others focused on relief that Lisa's killer would finally face consequences for his actions. Local news stations aired retrospective segments about the case, showing footage from the 1992 investigation and interviewing people who had known Lisa personally. The contrast between the young woman's vibrant life and the decades of mystery that followed her death struck viewers powerfully. The community's reaction reflected a complex mixture of emotions: satisfaction that justice was moving forward, betrayal at having unknowingly lived alongside Lisa's killer, and renewed grief for the young teacher's aide whose life had been cut short. The neighbor interviews broadcast on television became a stark reminder of how evil can hide behind an ordinary facade, living undetected in plain sight while victims' families suffer and communities struggle to heal. As prosecutors prepared their case against Gary Shara, the strength of the evidence became increasingly apparent. The DNA match established through genetic genealogy provided scientific proof of his presence at the crime scene, while his handwritten confession letters offered direct admission of guilt. The prosecution team, led by experienced district attorney personnel, faced the unusual situation of having both cutting-edge forensic evidence and old-fashioned written confessions. The combination created an almost unprecedented level of certainty in a case that had remained unsolved for 25 years. Grand jury proceedings began in late 2017 with prosecutors presenting evidence to establish probable cause for the serious charges against Shara. The genetic genealogy evidence required expert testimony to explain the science to grand jurors unfamiliar with the technology. Legal experts noted that Shara's case represented one of the first major prosecutions in Massachusetts to rely heavily on forensic genealogy evidence. The precedent being set could influence how similar cold cases would be investigated and prosecuted in the future. The defense attorneys faced the challenging task of representing a client whose own written words appeared to confirm his guilt. The confession letters, combined with the DNA evidence, left little room for traditional defense strategies based on mistaken identity or lack of evidence. The grand jury indictment that formally charged Gary Shara with Lisa Zeigert's murder represented a legal milestone in the use of advanced forensic techniques to solve cold cases and deliver justice to families who had waited decades for answers. For Lisa's family, the prospect of seeing Gary Shara face trial brought a complicated mixture of anticipation and dread. After 25 years of waiting for justice, they would finally have the opportunity to confront their daughter's killer in court, but the process would require reliving the trauma of her death. Diane Zeigert began preparing a victim impact statement that would be read during sentencing proceedings. The statement represented her chance to speak directly to Shara about the devastation his actions had caused, not just to Lisa, but to everyone who loved her. Family members attended preliminary hearings, sitting in the courtroom and observing the man who had destroyed their lives. Many described the experience as surreal. Seeing the face of someone who had been a mystery for so long, now revealed as an ordinary-looking person capable of extraordinary evil. The legal process moved slowly, with multiple hearings and procedural matters that had to be resolved before trial could begin. For Lisa's family, each court appearance was both progress toward justice and a painful reminder of their loss. Prosecutors kept the family informed about legal developments and explained the strength of the evidence against Shara. The DNA match and confession letters created confidence that conviction was likely, though the family had learned through long experience not to take anything for granted. Diane Zeigert's prepared court statement, written after 25 years of grief and waiting, would give voice to a mother's pain and serve as Lisa's final testimony about the impact of her killer's actions. The trial proceedings began in early 2019, with prosecutors presenting a methodical case that combined modern forensic science with traditional evidence. The courtroom was packed with Lisa's family members, community supporters, and media representatives, covering the long-awaited resolution of a case that had haunted Western Massachusetts for decades. The prosecution's opening statement outlined the evidence against Gary Shara: DNA analysis that placed him at the crime scene, handwritten letters in which he confessed to the murder, and circumstantial evidence linking him to Lisa's abduction and death. The case presentation was systematic and compelling. Expert witnesses explained the genetic genealogy process to jurors, describing how crime scene DNA had been traced through family trees to identify Shara as a suspect. The scientific testimony was complex, but crucial to establishing the reliability of the DNA evidence. The confession letters were read aloud in court, with Shara's own words describing his actions on the night Lisa died. The letters contained details about the crime that had never been made public, corroborating their authenticity and demonstrating Shara's intimate knowledge of the murder. Defense attorneys struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence against their client. The combination of scientific proof and written admissions left little room for reasonable doubt about Shara's guilt. The DNA evidence chart displayed for jurors showed the genetic markers that linked Sarah definitively to the crime scene, representing the culmination of 25 years of forensic advancement and the power of persistence in seeking justice. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a lengthy trial that would likely end in conviction, Gary Shara made a pivotal decision that surprised even his defense attorneys. Rather than proceed to trial, he chose to accept responsibility for his actions and plead guilty to the charges against him. The guilty plea hearing was attended by Lisa's family, who had waited 25 years to hear her killer admit his crime. When Shara stood before the judge and formally acknowledged his guilt in Lisa's murder, the courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of quiet weeping from family members. Judge Patricia Bernstein accepted Shara's guilty plea after ensuring that he understood the consequences of his decision. The plea agreement called for a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, guaranteeing that Shara would never again be free to harm another person. The guilty plea eliminated the need for a trial, sparing Lisa's family the ordeal of hearing detailed testimony about their daughter's final hours. It also removed any possibility that Sarah might appeal his conviction or seek to overturn the verdict. Prosecutors expressed satisfaction that justice had finally been served, noting that the guilty plea validated the strength of their evidence and the effectiveness of the investigative techniques that had led to Shara's identification. The plea agreement document that Shara signed represented his formal admission of guilt and acceptance of responsibility for crimes that had devastated a family and traumatized a community for a quarter of a century. The sentencing hearing provided Lisa's family with their long-awaited opportunity to address Gary Shara directly and speak about the impact his actions had on their lives. Diane Ziegert approached the podium with a prepared statement that captured 25 years of grief, frustration, and determination. "You stole our daughter from us," Diane told Shara, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You took away her future, her dreams, her chance to have a family of her own. But you didn't destroy our love for her or our determination to see justice done." Lisa's sister also spoke, describing the young woman her sister had been and the hole her death had left in their family. She talked about milestones Lisa would never reach, grandchildren she would never hold, and the constant shadow that her absence had cast over their lives. The impact statements were powerful reminders that Lisa's murder had affected not just one life, but an entire network of family members, friends, students, and community members who had known and loved her. The ripple effects of Shara's crime had touched hundreds of lives over the span of 25 years. Judge Bernstein sentenced Gary Shara to life in prison without the possibility of parole, calling his crime an act of unspeakable violence against an innocent young woman who was devoted to helping others. The sentence ensured that Shara would spend the remainder of his life behind bars. The life sentence judgment represented the legal system's final word on Gary Shara's fate and the closest approximation to justice that could be achieved for Lisa Ziegert's murder. Following Gary Shara's sentencing, Lisa's family and the broader community struggled to process the complex emotions that accompanied the resolution of such a long-standing tragedy. While justice had finally been served, the victory was bittersweet. Nothing could bring Lisa back or undo the 25 years of pain her family had endured. Diane Ziegert spoke to reporters after the sentencing, acknowledging that while she felt relief that Shara would never hurt anyone else, the end of the legal proceedings also brought a strange sense of emptiness. The case that had defined so much of her life for 2.5 decades was finally closed. The resolution of Lisa's case had broader implications for cold case investigations throughout Massachusetts and beyond. The successful use of genetic genealogy to identify a killer after 25 years demonstrated the power of persistence and advancing technology to deliver delayed justice. Detective Sarah Chen reflected on the investigation, noting that the case had required the contributions of multiple generations of law enforcement officers, forensic scientists, and genetic genealogists. The solution had been made possible by investigators who preserved evidence in 1992 and scientists who developed new techniques decades later. Community members expressed mixed feelings about the case's resolution. Many felt vindicated that their instincts about Lisa's character and the importance of seeking justice had been proven correct, but others struggled with the knowledge that they had unknowingly lived alongside her killer for years. The conclusion of Lisa's case served as a reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still emerge from patient investigation, scientific advancement, and the refusal of families to give up hope. In the months following Gary Shara's sentencing, efforts began to ensure that Lisa Zeigert's memory would be preserved in positive ways that reflected her life rather than just the circumstances of her death. Her family, friends, and former colleagues collaborated on initiatives that would honor her legacy of working with children. Agawam Middle School installed a memorial plaque in Lisa's honor, recognizing her dedication to special needs students and her impact on the lives of children who had learned from her. The plaque was placed in the school's main hallway, where it would remind future generations of teachers about Lisa's commitment to helping others. The scholarship fund established in Lisa's name continued to support aspiring educators, providing financial assistance to college students who planned to work with special needs children. Recipients were chosen based on their demonstration of the same qualities Lisa had shown: patience, kindness, and dedication to helping others succeed. Tommy, the student who had given Lisa his handmade thank you card on her final day, had grown into an adult who still remembered her kindness. He attended the memorial plaque dedication ceremony, placing flowers and sharing his memories of how Miss Lisa had made him feel valued and important. Lisa's case also contributed to advances in forensic science and cold case investigation techniques. The successful use of genetic genealogy helped establish protocols that would be used to solve other long unsolved crimes, potentially bringing closure to additional families who had waited years for justice. The memorial plaque bearing Lisa's name ensured that her legacy would endure at the school where she had made such a difference, keeping alive the memory of a teacher who had touched so many young lives. As the story of Lisa Zeigert's murder and the eventual arrest of Gary Shara drew to a close, the lessons and impact of the case continued to resonate throughout the community and beyond. The 25-year journey from tragedy to justice had revealed both the darkest and brightest aspects of human nature. The case demonstrated how evil can indeed hide in plain sight, with a killer living undetected among the very people who mourned his victim and searched for her murderer. Gary Shara's ability to maintain an ordinary facade while harboring such a terrible secret served as a sobering reminder that appearances can be profoundly deceiving. Equally powerful was the demonstration of human resilience and determination embodied by Lisa's family, particularly her mother Diane, who refused to let her daughter's case fade into obscurity. Their persistence, combined with the dedication of investigators across multiple decades, proved that the pursuit of justice can outlast even the most challenging circumstances. The role of advancing technology in solving Lisa's case offered hope to families of other cold case victims. The genetic genealogy techniques that identified Shara after 25 years represented a new frontier in forensic science, potentially applicable to thousands of unsolved crimes. Most importantly, Lisa herself remained the heart of the story, not as a victim defined by her tragic death, but as a young woman whose life had meaning and impact. Her students, colleagues, and family members continued to carry forward her legacy of kindness, patience, and dedication to helping others. The story concluded with a fundamental truth about justice. While it may be delayed by circumstances, technology, or human limitations, the pursuit of truth and accountability can endure across decades, driven by love, determination, and the refusal to accept that some crimes will remain forever unsolved. Lisa Zeigert's memory lived on in the lives she had touched, the justice that was finally served, and the reminder that even in the face of incomprehensible evil, hope and persistence can ultimately prevail.